Sure. I'm Erika Dailey, the project director for Turkmenistan for the Open Society Institute. And my last name is Dailey.
And the first name?
With a K.
So it's
Erika. That's right.
Great. Now we won't make fools of ourselves by not even spelling your name right. That's so bad.
Happens all the time.
Now, first give me a little sketch of Turkmenistan. I've got to say, I knew it was a country. I sort of vaguely knew where it was. That's about all I started off knowing about Turkmenistan.
Right.
Just characterize it a little bit for me.
Right. Well, Turkmenistan is unfortunately one of the more obscure repressive countries in the world today. It consistently ranks among the last 5 in the world of many notorious categories, everything from censorship to corruption. It is, in fact, a small country. It's only about 5 million population. It shares a very long border with Iran and Afghanistan and is located on the Caspian Sea. And because of its geographic location, really should have a higher profile than it does have. But one of the reasons that it's remained obscure is because of the levels of corruption and, or rather the levels of repression inside of the country, which has essentially made Turkmenistan remain very similar to the Soviet Union that it was supposed to have broken off from 15 years ago. And so I think when the retrospectives come of 15 years of the post-Soviet period, Turkmenistan will really continue to rank as part of that legacy, and indeed one of the worst parts of that legacy, because the violations are so serious. It's not only the continued existence of full censorship, banning of all foreign media, and the promotion of the personality cult of the dictator, Sapar Murad Niyazov, who is president for life, but it's also a return to some of the most brutal forms of repression that characterized the Soviet Union, including incarcerating dissidents in psychiatric hospitals against their will, internal exile, and so forth. So despite its notoriety and despite its natural wealth, it remains obscure. We are hoping that thanks to efforts like PEN's and to Rakhim Esenov's, that slowly the world will be giving this country its due attention.
What? When you say repressive, can you just give me a laundry list of the sorts of repressions that are common in Turkmenistan?
Yeah, again, some of it is very familiar to anyone who was aware during the Cold War days or is a historian of the 20th century. It's everything, as I said, from internal exile.
Okay, I'll do it again. As I said, they're not going to hear the first.
Right. It's
Why don't you start with Turkmenistan?
Okay. The government of Turkmenistan now perpetrates a full array of human rights violations, all on a mass scale. These violations include full censorship, banning of foreign media, all the way through to even banning the diagnosis of infectious diseases, which makes the country vulnerable, of course, to widespread epidemics, including outbreaks of HIV and AIDS. So the lack of freedom of information literally carries a life, what's the word?
Life-threatening.
Life-threatening, thank you. So the restrictions on information can literally be life-threatening in Turkmenistan. But in addition to that, there's full social control. Since Turkmenistan became an independent state after the fall of the Soviet Union, the head of state, in fact, the head of all 3 branches of government, Sapar Murad Niyazov, has been building an independent nation on the foundation of his idealized version of Turkmenistan. There has never in history existed Turkmenistan as an independent state. Unfortunately, this responsibility for building it has fallen to someone with enormous greed, corruption, and brutality built into the system. So the violations that we're seeing really emanate from an atmosphere of fear that is perpetrated by the secret police overwhelmingly. There is an enormous gulag of prisoners who are rotated in and out on an annual basis, so that people are literally taken from the street and shoved into cars and taken away. to replenish the numbers after the last so-called amnesty. Sorry. So there remain the Soviet-style gulags and full control of information.
Now, you've shown me a book. Tell me a little bit about this book and the role it plays.
Mm-hmm. Well, as in Soviet times, the word has enormous power, as in most dictatorships. And this is not lost on the president. What he's tried to do is create a vacuum of information by banning books, by closing libraries, by reducing education down to the 9th grade level, and by burning books on a mass scale, and filling that vacuum with his own ideology in the form of the Ruhnama, the spiritual book, the book of the spirit, as it's variously translated. And it's a 2-tome volume. The first tome came out in 2001. And ever since it came out, it has essentially eclipsed all forms of intellectual life inside the country. It has completely overshadowed what's left of a substantive curriculum. And, for example, anyone taught to do basic math is taught that if Ahmed reads 3 pages of the Ruhnama on Monday and 7 pages of the Ruhnama on Tuesday and 2 less on Wednesday, how many pages of the Ruhnama has Ahmed read? It's literally to that level of control. And the Ruhnama has become really the touchstone for almost all policies. In and of itself, it's a very difficult book to read. It's a lot of rambling political exhortations to patriotism, a little bit of history, a little bit of autobiography of the president. And all citizens are required to read it and take tests in it in order to receive any form of education. If you're a taxi driver or if you're a doctor or a street cleaner, everyone has to pass tests in the Ruhnama. And this is, unfortunately, to the exclusion of all other substantive learning. The Ruhnama has also become the calling card for international business. When investors come in and want to have access to Turkmenistan's extremely large natural gas reserves, it's become customary to first translate the Ruhnama into that country's language and then make it a present to the president in order to essentially grease the wheels towards investment. So the Ruhnama today exists in Dutch and German and Swahili. And has really, in many ways, overshadowed normal business relations as well. And the final slap in the face to the people was to have this book that has taken away so much from their lives actually launched into space. So the Ruhnama is now satelliting its way around the world.
Jeez. I heard, or at least I found on a website, tell me if this is true, that this guy has renamed the month and days of the week after himself and his mother?
Yes. The cult of personality is pervasive. Not only is the president's image all over in terms of pictures and statues, much as it was for Lenin, for example, and Karl Marx. Today, he has also introduced an honorific for himself, Turkmenbashi, the leader of the Turkmen, and then took it one step further after introducing that, and now everyone is required to call him the Great Turkmenbashi. In effect, he has required everyone to recognize him as a prophet and the Ruhnama as its holy book. So the cult of personality is in fact pervasive. The first month of the year is now Turkmenbashi. The principal port in Turkmenistan is now Turkmenbashi. And so forth. It's really become ubiquitous. The president's picture is on absolutely everything, from all the cliches that are most commonly heard of in the West that journalists tend to focus on. So from vodka bottles to calendars. His face is in fact confusingly on every single month of the year. So it's easy to get confused. But unfortunately, through the kind of humoristic approach that many journalists have taken to the country, people outside of the country have been deprived of the information about what is extremely tragic. And those are the declining social, economic, and political trends in Turkmenistan that have turned it into one of the most closed and brutally repressive countries in the world.
Now, what is Esenov's book? If I'm right, it's a history book, a novel about a general and poet who lived in the 1500s? Why is this controversial? Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah, in point of fact, again, in any dictatorship that appreciates the power of the word to control people's minds, a book as potentially banal in other contexts as the book for which Rakhim Esenov was punished, was sent to prison, and for which the book was banned, is really quite extraordinary. It's a book about a traveler, a poet, a philosopher who was traveling around the Mughal Empire in medieval India. And one would think that it was a fairly banal book that few people would read. Not so in Turkmenistan. Because of the political pressures inside the country, because libraries have virtually all been closed, because books have been burned on a mass scale, because it is virtually impossible to get anything to read except at free market bazaars where people are selling their last box of matches, literally. What we're looking at is a book that, in fact, we're looking at a book that posed an extreme threat to the president. In fact, the book had been banned in 1997. It had never been published because essentially there's no more publishing in Turkmenistan. It was finally published by the author in Russia, and he had given, and the author had made a present of the book to President Niyazov, with whom he used to work. Bear in mind that Rakhim Esenov was himself a very prominent communist during the communist period. He was the chairman of the Writers' Union, which was clearly state-controlled. And as a gesture to the president, he gave him a copy. The president reportedly took exception to the fact that any book about Turkmenistan had been published without his control, in other words, outside of the country, and as a result brought criminal charges against Rakhim Esenov. The part of the book that appears to be offensive in the eyes of the president, and again, this is only hearsay because it's impossible to read the mind of a dictator, is that the character who is the protagonist in the book, Bayram Khan, is in fact a Shiite rather than a Sunni. And in terms of the idealized version of Turkmenistan that President Niyazov has been building, it would be inconsistent for Turkmen to be associated with Shiites. So one of the interpretations about why the book was so offensive to the president was simply over that fact. As we all know, people are dying today because of that distinction, so it is not a small distinction. But in terms of a literary endeavor and simply a historical interpretation, it was very serious in Turkmenistan as well, and Rakhim Esenov went to prison for it.
It's just amazing. When someone like Penn gives an award like this, is that as much to make a cause célèbre of the author as it is to salute his work?
Penn's award is and should be not only a salute to the author and to the courage it took to write in this extremely hostile environment, but also to try to make a cause célèbre, to try to raise attention to larger issues. Because Turkmenistan has not enjoyed due attention over the years, given the extraordinary size or the extraordinary breadth of human rights violations inside the country, it's terribly important to raise attention to all the attending problems that it takes to write a book in Turkmenistan. It's not simply sitting and writing. In order to publish, in this case, Rakhim Esenov had to leave his own country to go to another country to have it published. And as part of his punishment, he is not only under house arrest and has been since he was released under international pressure in February of 2004, but he is not allowed to leave the country even to seek urgently needed medical attention. So Penn has made an enormous contribution by honoring Mr. Esenov. Mr. Esenov's contribution is literary. It's also, through Penn, a contribution to anyone interested in the principles behind the importance of writing. By inviting Mr. Esenov to come to New York to receive this award, Penn is challenging the government of Turkmenistan to let him out. Penn is asking foreign governments to stand behind this, to acknowledge the importance, and to help insist that in this case, Mr. Esenov be let out of the country. He is only one person out of thousands who are not let out of their own country. The blacklists have continued, even though a formal exit ban has been lifted. And by the time this film is viewed, we will know the answer, whether or not the government did indeed cave to pressure and allow him to come. But the fact of the award in and of itself has already clearly changed the life of this man who has been living in complete isolation as a pariah in his own society simply because he wrote something that displeased the president.
It's astonishing that this stuff still happens. I mean, it seems so jaw-dropping to us. I mean, boy, people write books that the president hates every day.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of an interesting contrast to me. I mean, here we are in a country that almost celebrates books that rile people up.
Mm.
Can you talk to me a little bit about that difference?
Sure. I'm trying to think how best to put it. In a society where the freedom to think, the freedom of expression is honored, the full spectrum of opinion is embraced. In fact, the fact of writing is embraced. In a dictatorship, there is a vacuum of opinion. There is only the opinion of the president. And in that kind of extremely hostile and violent atmosphere, it's very difficult to say or write almost anything for fear of retribution by the police, by neighbors who turn you in. Even children are turning in their parents because their teachers tell them to. If they don't sufficiently know what's contained in the president's book, if the parents can't recite the names of the parents of the president's favorite horse, they often lose their jobs. It's an extreme situation that is almost difficult to describe in words, but the result has been pervasive fear that has precluded writers from saying anything at all, even something quite banal. It's true that in the West, presidents write their own books and people buy them because they are of interest or because they like or dislike what the president stands for and want to know more. In Turkmenistan, it's all turned on its head. The president has written a book that they're forced to read and they're forced to memorize. And it makes it almost difficult for people outside of that information vacuum to comprehend that this still goes on. But as in Mao's time, children in Turkmenistan today are forced to buy it, even if they can't buy food, to hold the book with the cover facing out so that people walking along the street can see the president's face, and must study this to the exclusion of any sort of substantive education. And what's happened is, in point of fact, it's a renewed education for all of us about the power of the word. In the case of Turkmenistan, it's a tragic lesson. What children today are learning is not going to be enough, not remotely enough, for them to be able to run their government, to teach in schools, to build roads, to be airline controllers. Who's going to land the planes? Who's going to deliver children? There is created through this one book, the Ruhnama, a lost generation. And it's certainly everyone's hope that through efforts like Penn's and efforts like Rakhim Esenov's, that we can raise attention to the fact that this generation is being lost and that there's an urgent need to turn that around. Otherwise, Turkmenistan will very rapidly become the ward of the international community and yet another destabilizing factor in what is already a very volatile part of the world.
Does it surprise you that people don't know about this?
This being what?
Turkmenistan and this. I mean, we sort of generally think, oh, those areas of the world are different from us.
Mm-hmm.
But I had no idea that there were still President for Lifes running around. I mean, it's, Idi Amin territory.
Right, right.
Does it surprise you that this isn't more widely known?
It disappoints me that this is not more widely known. Until recently, there was really an enormous absence of information about it, which is a very natural product of a closed country, When there is no ability to speak inside the country, there's no capacity to take information out. Journalists are not allowed in. Many people, including myself, are not allowed in. So in a way, it's not at all surprising that people know so little. I think North Korea, for example, suffers from the exact same problem. Unless you have someone who is able to defect, to flee the country, and speak about what they have experienced and what they've seen, there really is no proper way to understand what's going on. I think an additional problem is the inability often to fathom what's happening there, that the deterioration is happening at such a lightning pace and in ways that don't exist elsewhere, that in a way there's no basis for comparison. There's simply, there's no traction intellectually on how to grasp what's happening in this country. Just within recent months, the government has dramatically reduced or even completely abolished pensions. In a country where there is virtually no employment outside of the government sector, there is also no income apart from the government. People may have worked their entire lives, and that would be their sole source of income. In most cases, they're also supporting their own families, the next 2 generations, because they have no income. And when even pensions are cut off, it's tantamount to very slow death being imposed on a country that has one of the largest natural gas reserves in the world. What's barring this is corruption and dictatorship. So am I surprised that Turkmenistan remains relatively obscure? No. There's simply, it's too difficult at this point to get enough information, but it's something that we're all battling. There's a wonderful international coalition that has developed around Turkmenistan that through collective efforts and through the bravery of many people who are inside the country or have emigrated, have compiled sufficient documentation at this point to be able to present Turkmenistan to the world in a way that things can be called by their proper names. We are at a historic moment now, and I think PEN's decision to honor Rakhim Esenov is very much what do you call it? Well, that PEN's decision to honor Rakhim Esenov is going to help promote those efforts in very meaningful ways until there's an understanding, however vague, of the horrors of what is happening inside Turkmenistan. We will not be able to do what we can to help. Obviously, we would all like the day to come when people inside Turkmenistan will be able to vote, will be able to speak and publish freely. And until that time comes, we thank PEN and the people that PEN honors for their bravery and for helping to bring badly needed attention to the international community.
Why a book? A book seems like such a trivial thing in a country that's battling poverty. That's why would a dictator focus so much attention and trouble on just a guy who wrote a historical novel?
Mm-hmm. The brouhaha that has arisen about this particular book has happened in isolation. If you ask the average Turkmen on the street, they will have no idea that Rakhim Esenov has written a book. The people are living in isolation. The book was written over the course of 15 years in secret. When the authorities first got wind of it, it was banned in 1997. Since then, there hadn't been a peep until Mr. Esenov himself took the initiative to take it to a publisher in Russia and have it published there. He brought 800 copies, a tiny amount, into Turkmenistan, and as soon as he set foot back in the country, he was arrested. His son-in-law, who helped physically bring the books into the country, was arrested, and all 800 books were destroyed. There is no trace, essentially, of this book in Turkmenistan. The legacy of the book is much better known outside of the country than in. That may change with time, and again, through the efforts of PEN and others to bring attention to this book, hopefully that will change. But it is no mystery that the printed word can be enormously influential in both state building, in promoting history, and in controlling societies. And that message is certainly not lost on the dictator in Turkmenistan.
He was also besides, he's a historian and a novelist. He's never worked in newspapers, though. He's not a journalist, as I recall. But he's done Radio Free Europe.
Yeah, he did Radio Free Europe.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Okay, let me try to recreate it myself, because it was sort of sporadic.
I mean, if someone from within Turkmenistan is broadcasting on Radio Free Europe, that's significant, isn't it?
Yeah, it was very circumscribed, though. There was not a lot of that. I think how to put this. Overwhelmingly, Rakhim Esenov is a novelist, a writer. Most of his work has been on historical fiction. He's also written short stories. And in part, I guess, because of his natural need to communicate, he has also contributed information to Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, for their Turkmen service. He had been, in fact, a radio broadcaster during the Soviet period for state television. So he was very much part of the propaganda machine for many years. Later in life, when he himself fell afoul of the government, he turned to what is known as a surrogate medium, the independent and often oppositional voice of Radio Liberty. And that had been a source of some very modest income for him, some source of survival during his later years. And today he is sometimes called upon to speak over Radio Liberty, but he restricts himself out of fear to only the most banal topics.
What forces are trying to get him to this award, to this ceremony?
I hate talking in banalities, Anne.
Sorry. Then don't.
You should better get pen to ask that. I'm just afraid
Well,
all
they
I'm
have
going to
spoken
say
about
is,
that.
I'm sure, is the most banal, hackneyed. You don't need me to talk about freedom of speech.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is there anything you wanted to say about Esenov that I haven't asked you a question that leads to?
Rakhim Esenov has had a very interesting personal evolution as a writer and possibly as a person. I hope he will be on hand to tell everyone about this himself. In case he isn't, though, I think his personal story is one that's worth telling. He rose up through the ranks of the Communist Party and was one of the leaders of the Communist Party as chairman of the Writers' Union and as a leading member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Turkmenistan for many years. He was part of the machine that perpetuated censorship, that perpetuated control of thought, that perpetuated repression. In his later, as he was part of that machine, though, over the course of decades, he was also quietly writing his short stories and quietly writing his historical novels and creating for himself a space for his own ideas and for a truth that he wanted to express. The result of that surreptitious work ultimately was banned and led to his arrest and has led to his almost permanent de facto house arrest, has led him to live an extremely isolated and circumscribed life. It's a story that you see repeated very often in the post-Soviet Union, where some of the leading intellectuals who were very much part of the system, because that was where they found their way to survive, have in turn embraced an opposition perspective. He has more or less come full circle intellectually, going from being part of the machine to being someone who is still willing to resist centralized control. The reason for his arrest appears to be very much a personal conflict between him and the dictator, Sapar Murad Niyazov. President Niyazov is extremely thin-skinned, as are many dictators. And the fact that such a leading figure in what is essentially a very small country would attempt to do something beyond the president's control was seen as extremely insulting to the president, and ultimately sufficient to bring up charges of the violation of Article 177 of the Criminal Code, which is incitement to social and cultural, what do you call that? I can't think in English. Unrest, or no, there's a very specific legal term.
Inciting social, national, and religious hatred.
Hatred, there you
mass
go.
Media.
There you go. So, I don't know how should I start that?
How did we get there first?
That's all right.
Okay. So you were talking a little bit about the charges that...
Right, and towards what end? What was the, sorry, remind me the essence of, yeah.
That such a charge is even, can stick, that is even something, using the mass media, which doesn't exist. It's basically because I don't like it, in
Right.
secret code.
Right, right. You should be doing this. Well, essentially, the story of what happened with Rakhim Esenov is the story of how not to offend a dictator. It's probably even unlikely that the president himself has read the book. And it is much more likely that he simply took offense at the fact that someone who used to be a loyalist has taken a separate path, has chosen to direct his own creative expression in ways that do not support the Ruhnama and do not support the idealized state-building ideology that the president has been forcing on the country. And that alone was sufficient to bring him up on criminal charges of violating Article 177 of the Criminal Code of Turkmenistan, which prohibits the incitement of social, national, and religious hatred through the mass media. In point of fact, there were no mass media used. It was 800 books independently published, all of which were destroyed. It's a lesson in, ultimately, in freedom of speech. And it becomes a story that must be told, that gains particular importance, because it happens in a certain environment. In a country like Turkmenistan, where everything is under scrutiny and where everything must be approved according to state ideology, there's essentially no room for creative writing at this point. But we hope that by bringing attention to the problems that writers like Esenov face, such as something as simple as getting medical care or taking a trip, that this will help raise awareness to the broader picture of decline in Turkmenistan and perhaps deter some of it.
Great. You did it.
Banal, banal,
Almost
banal.
too easy.
Banal, banal, banal. No, I have yet to find somebody who can put this in proper terms. I'm still looking for the journalist.
Here. So give you a plug.
Oh, thank you.
And if you sort of lose your train of thought in the middle of an answer, you can say, I've just lost my train of thought. Can we do that one again? And the answer is always yes. So
Okay. Thank
I want to
you.
make this as low stress as possible. I'm sitting here being a bad mother because my 7-year-old has her soccer game tomorrow and I'm praying for rain.
You want a day
Wouldn't
off?
it be great if I didn't have to get up early in the morning and not go to the soccer game? Because out on Ward's Island, we have to ride a bus to it, and she's so enthusiastic about it, and she's so happy to be a soccer player, and I feel like a wet blanket, but I'd rather sleep late.
Nobody else to take her?
Well, the dad takes my boy to his soccer game on Sunday, so that means that I take the girl.
You good to go?
So. All right, now, Jeri, if you could first, the easy part, tell me your name and your title and spell your name so we can't get it wrong.
Okay. I'm Jeri Laber, Jeri-Laber. I'm a consultant to the International Freedom to Publish Committee. of the Association of American Publishers.
Oof, that's a mouthful.
It is.
Can't you get a zippier title like Queen of Books or something like that? I mean, that would...
Well, I have a few other titles, but I think that's the relevant one for this evening. So.
Other titles that we can't repeat on television? That would be interesting. All right. Now, our subject here is Mohammed Hashem. It's Hashem?
Hashem.
Hashem. So I pronounced that right, too. And he is being given an award for freedom to publish. I had never thought of it in that light before. I've thought of freedom of speech. I've thought freedom as terms of a writer. But freedom to publish seems an interesting, different angle on that to me. Why is freedom to publish important?
I think that publishers are the unsung heroes of the freedom of expression struggle. When a book gets banned or censored, you hear about the author. He's the one who wrote the words, of course. He's the one who goes on trial, and very often he's sentenced to prison. But what we don't often know is that in many countries, the publisher who published the works and made it available to the public goes along to prison along with the writer. That's why the committee at the Publishers Association formed itself to begin with to protect the rights of publishers throughout the world, and then decided to have an award for a publisher who has distinguished himself in the struggle for free expression somewhere in the world.
Now, I don't think of, I mean, some of the other awards that are being given are in Turkmenistan, in Algeria. I already have some back of my head knowledge. Oh yes, repressive regimes, hard place to work. Egypt doesn't seem to me a place that is known for repressing, and yet the more I read, the more I thought, well, this is something I didn't know. Do you think it surprises people that Egypt is on the list of?
Publishers in Egypt suffer from two kinds of pressures. One is political and one is religious. And Mr. Hashem has been courageous in standing up to both of them and continuing to publish independently works of his own choosing, often risking financial and political success by introducing new authors, some of whom have actually won prestigious awards for their work. He's been very dedicated and brave in being his own person and refusing to self-censor himself, which is usually the case in a situation like Egypt.
In looking at some articles on the web about him that quote him, it was interesting to me that these aren't necessarily works that people in America might approve of. I mean, I always think of, they're struggling to bring freedom and democracy. He was involved in a boycott of all things America because he thinks America is a terrible force in the world. In this article I was quoting, that he is big into Palestinian works because he supports it and is very anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian. And I was surprised because I, of course, knee-jerk think that he's going to be supporting the same things I'm supporting. But in a way, then when I thought about it, freedom to publish is freedom to publish everything. Do you take that into account at all when you award something, whether it's popular with us? I don't know how to say that right.
Well, we believe in freedom to publish, in free expression, regardless of what the content is. I'm not sure that all of us on our committee would necessarily agree with the content of some of the works that Mr. Hashem has published. I'm not sure that we share the same political views. That hasn't been our concern. Members of our committee, Hal Fessenden and Peternell Van Arsdale, went to Cairo. They met with Mr. Hashem. They were extremely impressed with the work he was doing, with the fact that he was his own person, an independent publisher, fighting against extreme pressures to conform.
And I've read that they have threatened to shut him down, but they never have shut him down.
He has been physically threatened. He has had his books confiscated. He has suffered financial losses because when a book is confiscated, it doesn't provide any money to the publisher who has already, especially if he's already published it. And he has stood up to these pressures, and I hope that this award will help him by giving him prestige from abroad and make it, can I start that all over again?
Sure, absolutely.
Where do I start?
Where you were going there at the end.
Can I don't have to go through the whole thing?
No, I think we can catch it.
Okay. I hope that this award will serve as a protection for him by giving him some notoriety abroad.
So is that part of what, because it's not as though they're getting $1 million and a new house and 2 cars in their garage that you're going to ship to them. What do you hope to give them?
I think the award serves several purposes. One is just moral support for people who are out there on the front lines doing something which takes a lot of courage and must be very lonely a lot of the time. But it, also, as I say, I think it served notice to the authorities who might be putting the pressure on him that this man is recognized outside of his own country, that there are people who know of his existence, know what he's doing, and respect it, and they might treat him a little bit more kindly in the future. That's our hope.
Okay, so it's sort of a trophy that they can club someone with. Do you think what is bothering Egyptian forces about his books are the creative writing books, or the more obviously political book? Is one more dangerous than another in a repressive regime's view?
It's hard to say what repressive governments see as threatening in the written word. It depends, I think, on a lot of idiosyncrasies, and a lot of things get by without them seeing it. I don't really know about Egypt, so maybe I shouldn't be talking about this. I'm not sure what they look for.
That's right. I was also astonished that Egypt's had emergency laws in place for 30 years. I had no idea. They passed an emergency law 30 years ago that's still in place. Is this... I guess it can be both. I'm thinking, is it more brave or more foolish for people to do things like this? Is there... I guess at a certain point, if you believe in the right to publish, it all blends together, and it doesn't matter whether it's brave or foolish. You stand up for your... Do you think this is someone who's making a case and standing up for his ideals, or just doing what he wants to do, which is publish books?
Well, Mr. Hashem is an activist. He is active in a group called Writers and Artists for Change. He has helped found that group. He's also a novelist and a writer himself. And I think that all of this makes for a consistent personality, somebody who wants to write what he wants to write and wants to publish what he wants to publish. And of course he must know that he is taking risks. He's not operating in a vacuum, but he's decided obviously that it's important enough to him to take those risks and to be true to his own philosophy.
It's wonderful to see a practicing idealist, because they're few and far between. What else do you want to say about this award and the usefulness of it in sort of the world of letters?
When the International Freedom to Publish Committee decided to name its award after me, I was, of course, very touched. But I also think that there was an association they were making. I've spent my entire life working for human rights. I'm one of the founders of Human Rights Watch. And I think that in naming this award, they were saying freedom of expression is a basic human rights right, which, can I say this over again?
Yep.
Is it a good thing? Okay, let me start from the beginning. When the International Freedom to Publish Committee decided to name its award after me, I was, of course, very touched. But I realized also they were making a larger statement, which is that freedom of expression and human rights, which is the field in which I've worked all my life, are basically connected. I think if you had to choose one human right, it would be freedom of expression, because without it, nothing happens, and with it, everything flows. And I think the connection between freedom of expression and human rights is embodied in this award, and I feel very proud of it.
As you should.
is there anything you wanted to say about Hashem that I haven't led you to?
I don't think so. I think I covered all my points.
And is there anything we should be including here that I'm not thinking of?
No, I think you've got
You've
it
done
all.
you're
Did
so
you
succinct.
did you get the video?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So all you
the
have
other
it.
vision part of television.
That's all you have really is the video and what I'm saying.
Yeah. So we're hoping that comes in.
I certainly hope so too, and I hope what I say works with
Yes,
it.
I think it will. I think it will.
If not, I'll be happy to do some more for you, though I hope it won't be necessary.
Yeah.
Or maybe.
I think you got it. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Oops.
And I'll take the shirt. You can wear it a couple more times.